Hey everyone, I had a little bit of a technical issue with the recording. I filmed the entire critique, and then for whatever reason, the computer I'm using malfunctioned and only recorded part of it. So I'm going to go through the rest of the critique here, um, showing you what I did in the full critique, and I hope it will make sense as we move forward. So the next one here we have is Wyatt. So if we look here, Wyatt, some of the problems I noticed had to do with the proportion. So it looked like the back of the head was a little too large for the front of the face. So I sort of chopped off the back, and then using the lighting effect, I pushed the difference between light and shadow, trying to refine some of these light and shadow shapes. And then I also used a fall off of light, so really bright light to darker, weaker, weaker, weaker until I get to shadow, and that starts to give us a little more form. So before and after, just a little bit of cleanup and a little bit of drawing, and then a little bit of form will pull us closer to this finished product. Sorry I don't have the full one for you, but this is the nature of what happened. So moving forward, let's go to the next one. This is Rose. Uh, Again, here, Rose, I thought it was a really great drawing. A few things I noticed had to do with the form on the head, meaning as we went over the form, I was going over the brow, then inside, then over, then inside, then over, then inside. So we're kind of getting this oscillation of form. So to remedy that, I used a more even tone that allowed us to slowly move over this round skull. And for me, that underlying form is the most important aspect that we can capture. Also tried to, I don't have the photo reference, but I tried to combine a little bit more of the light shapes together to keep them a little more solid. And then as we moved down, I noticed that maybe the jaw was a little bit small on the back there. So making it a little bit thicker and maybe raising up this chin a little bit, I think pulls things into proportion a little bit closer. So anyway, it's a really great drawing. These are just a few suggestions, some little things to look at, but really, really great. Sorry I don't have the original recording, but good work. Let's go on to the next one. This one is Celeste. It was a great drawing, Celeste. It felt like a few things. The reflected light was too bright. I know it's bright here, but as far as a light-only drawing, I would like you to keep those things in shadow darker than in light, and so keeping the white paint out is going to be a good move. And then using the form, so knocking down these lights and trying to localize the form, going bright to dark as it falls over the skull, to keep it feeling round, I think is a good idea. Also, the zygomatic arch and some of the reflected light was a little low and felt a little too bright, so I knocked those down, and then I refined these shapes in here, just getting some harder edges in and around the eye sockets and in on the nose plane here. There's some small adjustments, but I think it's helpful. So let me know if you have any questions. Let's go to the next one. This one was, I believe it's Malia. Nice drawing, Malia. The things I noticed most, there were some drawing things like cutting off the front of the skull felt a little bit better to me. The chin coming out a little bit further, I think, is a good move. And then the reflected light, it was just too light everywhere, and we need to knock it down. We need to keep shadow and light separate, and so I did that by just using your eraser. You can lift out that white charcoal, and that's going to be a big help. Also, as the skull wraps over the form and wraps back over the back of the head, we're going to use that value to describe that happening. So I did something like that. So it's a nice drawing. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's go on to the next one. This one is India. Nice drawing, India. I noticed on this one the tilt of the head was just different from the original, which probably gave you quite a few issues in the drawing. We got to make sure that we recognize the head tilting back at the beginning. By identifying the center line, that will help us to identify where that tilt is. But looking at the head, I knocked down the reflected light. So we had all these little bits of light, but I would reduce those so that they become part of shadow. So knocking those down cleans up the light shapes and gives us a little bit of clarity of what's happening. By emphasizing those areas in light, we are left without those areas in shadow, but we don't really miss them. So there's a few ideas there. Also, anything in light, I would want to make sure doesn't have as much contrast as I think. we do see here that this value looks very dark compared to this light, and it is, but compared to the other shadows, it is very, very light. And so we want to make sure that when I put in those darks that they're not going part of shadow. Same thing for these little brow here as it goes into this glabella. We want to make sure that these are darker than these values in the shadow, and so I reduce them down. You can see if I just grab this value and I move it over, you can see how much lighter they are than the rest of the shadow. So I want to be careful not to over model like that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This one is Masha. Good drawing, Masha. I think what I wanted was the tilt on the head. It was a little bit different. And then I also wanted to see just a little bit more form modeling. So as the light hits the forehead, it will progressively get darker as it moves to the back of the head. If we keep it too light, it will flatten out and not read correctly. So progressively get darker will give us a greater sense of form. Same thing as I move down, I'm going to make sure I'm going to get rid of there's a lot of darks in here. I'm going to even it out, make it all feel like a bit of light, and I think that's really, really going to help. As far as the drawing, it feels pretty good. I took off a little bit of the top of the head, but mainly it's about using light to describe form, um, and a little bit less to do with the drawing. So good work. Let's go on the next one. This one is Sofia. Great drawing, Sofia. One thing I noticed is that the far socket was far larger than the near socket, but in the reference and in life, that near socket's going to be larger than the far socket. So I made the near socket larger, made the far socket a little bit smaller. It starts giving us a little bit more correct construction out of the head. As we start looking at the form, I push the lights brighter near the source of light, so near the highlight, and as it falls of the form, I'm making it progressively darker. Um, that's going to be important to tell a story of the skull a little bit more. And then as it passes over, I reduced some of these dark lines that you had in there. I think they were a little distracting, so I just kind of erased them out. Also, there's a little bit of light down here on the bottom jaw. Remove that because it's further away from the light source and it's wrapping underneath, so we want to make sure that we keep that darker. It's really nice drawing. There's just a few things to look at. That's the before and that's the after. Some things to think about. So let's go on to the next one. This one is Caroline. Really nice drawing, Caroline. I just noticed that if we can possibly use value to describe form a little bit more, we'll get just a little bit of a smoother, rounder skull. Before, what we were seeing was the skull was coming out, going in, coming out, going in, coming out, going in. So we were getting this sort of oscillation over the form. When I even out the tone, now what happens is that we have that bright light and it slowly wraps back into the skull. As I wrap forward, I also reduce that pivot, or that dent in the head, and so it does tuck down and then come back out, but it's much smoother than it would have been where it tucks further in and then comes further out when it goes and then out. But so that's an idea to think about moving forward. I think there was a far side jaw. I didn't know if it was a little confusing as to what it was, so I just removed it, and I removed a little bit of the dark line off the front. But this is a great drawing. Just a few little adjustments there, and I think you're well on your way. So awesome. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's go on to the next one. This is Ashley, another great one. Main thing, reduce the reflected light. It went too light. We got to knock it down and get rid of it. And then I also knocked down some of the light value down on the mandible down here, made it darker. And then on the skull, I tried to round it out by evening the tone. So by going like this kind of value pattern, we're seeing that it is light, and then it goes really dark, and then it goes light, and then it goes dark, light, and then it goes dark, and then it goes light. So it's wrapping over the head like this. If I do something like this, now that tone feels smoother and it wraps over the head a little bit more even. And so that's a little adjustment I would have you look at and move forward. So anyway, really nice drawing, just a few adjustments. There's the before, there's the after. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's go on to the next one. This one is Shelby. Didn't have the reference here, Shelby. But something I noticed is the value was the same all the way over the skull. The big idea I was trying to get across to you was we can use value to tell the story of the form. So if I have, for instance, if I draw a circle, or let's do like, if I draw a circle and I put white all the way on the inside of that circle, it becomes really quite flat. What's important here is that if I'm trying to describe to the viewer a circle, if I put a light, a little bit of light here, and then I make it brighter and brighter and brighter, this will start to feel more round to the viewer than this will. And so that's the essence of form. So when we look at the skull, what we're trying to do is get the right and left side to feel round and passing behind. So what we need to do is have a bright light and then have it progress towards darker as it moves over the form, and that will make that skull feel rounder. The same idea is true from here to here, right? As I work down, I want that to be darker as well. So be thinking of that as you add value. It's not so much copying as much as it is interpreting and showing the viewer what you want them to see. So very nice. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's go on to the next one. This one is Rachel. Didn't have your reference here, Rachel, so it was a little confusing as to the positioning. It feels good. A few things I'd have you do is try to think of form more. What I mean by that is if I draw a circle and then I put in a flat value on the circle, that thing's gonna feel flat, and that's what happens when I put a value uh, here and here and here and here and here, and all these values are the same. Instead, if I draw a same circle and I put a little bit of light, and then I put an even greater degree of light, and then this value as it wraps over the form will start to feel like it's coming out at us more so than this one will. So by adding the value of going really bright here on the skull and then progressively getting darker as it wraps over the form, that will start to feel more formful than the rest. The other part I was seeing is it feels like the nasal bone can come forward a little bit more, and the sizing, it feels like there's a little bit of drawing issue in there, but without the reference, I can't get you closer. So anyway, let me know if you have any particular questions on this one, and yeah, let's go on to the next one. And then this one is Marissa. Great job, Marissa. It feels good. As far as drawing, it felt like the cranium was a little small. Try to make that larger. And then with the reflected light, what I wanted was for anything in shadow to be reduced down to that paper value or that paper color. So all those lights bouncing around in there are part of shadow, and so we reduce them down to remain as part of shadow. That's the only thing I was noticing there. Just reflected light and the size of the cranium. Also this zygomatic attachment here. I think we can join those two together and it would feel a little bit closer. Hard to give feedback without the reference, but these are just some thoughts to move forward. Also, looking at this little light down here on the jaw, we want to make sure it stays darker. It's further away from the light. We need to make sure it has that effect of light falling on it. So anyway, great drawing. Let me know if you have any questions, and there you go. So I'm sorry that was so quick. I recorded a couple hour critique with these, but lost the information. I'm going to send these out so you have something, but I don't have the time to re-record everything. So anyway, sorry about that. Let me know if you have specific questions, and I'll get back to you. So thanks.